Okay, here we go. So, I've been shooting a number of videos. This is about 13th, 14th video in this playlist that I'm putting together. It's explained a lot of uh, spiritual matters, um, and I'm not even gonna rehash that much of what I've already said, but hopefully this will be the last video where I'm explaining spiritual matters, and it'll be the one where I say what it is I think we're going to see in the very near future, probably by my next birthday, which is the day after Valentine's Day. So by my 53rd birthday on February 15th of 2022, we'll probably see some of this stuff play out because, like I said in the last couple of videos, that's two or three anyway, um, I mentioned how that a lot of things are falling apart in the world, and well, I mean, if you follow the news, you don't need me to tell you all of what's going wrong right now. Um, if you didn't just crawl out from under a rock and smoke it, then you don't need me to tell you what's happening on a worldwide level. Um, but let me see where I'm going to start with this one. So I've mentioned, that this 14th spear of thought is in some ways a restructuring of that 10th. Um, so that 12th spear has to do with death and destruction on different levels. You can look at the previous videos. Um, 13th has to do with necessary evils that prevent destruction on different levels. Uh, in this 14th, it's not the end of spiritual considerations, but it's the final level of thought that, at least that I'm going to lay out here, and it's the last one that we really need to even be concerned with. Everything else that I would have to say just kind of plays off of what I've already mentioned. But anyway, so a 10th sphere of thought is the man's conceptual thought that transcends his rationale and compartmentalizes everything. Uh, and it, like I said in previous videos, quite a few videos back, um, it is the first part of the mind that's able to adequately think about society and the concepts that govern society, that govern the behaviors of large numbers of people, types of things that people do, and how you need to basically be prepared for the different personalities and what have you that you encounter in society. Um, but yeah, so it is a compartmentalizing part of the mind. And so as you're coming back down the list from the 12th to the 11th, which actually gets used as a 13th part, going up the list from 10 to 11, that 11th is that God element, that 12th is that death angel element, and the 13th actually prevents death. It's a different type of godhood, one that is conscious of the death and destruction that can occur in the universe as a whole or in society. And it's a type of godliness that, like I say, works to prevent the destruction, because just becoming a demigod, thinking yourself into that level where you develop that 11th level of thought, is not the same as understanding what uh, can cause society to implode. And anyway, yeah, so you got to have that 13th. You got to have that uh, death preventing Hadean way of thinking. That's why God has Satan and God does various evils, but they're necessary evils. Okay, I said all that a number of times before. But so what would this 14th and final sphere of thought do? Well, it's where enough has been done to hold things together, and destruction has been prevented, and so you go back to using a sphere of thought that someone can be born with. It doesn't require that you think yourself into godhood. Um, and so as you come back down the list from the 12th to the 11th slash 13th down to the 10th slash 14th sphere of thought, level of thought, then you're on the one hand bearing in mind that you needed God's evil to necessary evils to hold things together, but you also want to break away from that system of necessary evils. Well, like Jesus said, he prayed and said, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." So when is enough enough? And when do we get to think about manly concepts as opposed to godly concepts, and bring about our idea of peace? So there's a lot that I could say about it, but let me see what how I'm going to get off to a good start and try to keep this video from becoming too long. Try to get this done in the next 18 minutes. So well, this 14th level of thought, it actually makes gender equality possible. Oh, and I can say a mouthful about that. If I let myself go, I'll be gone for hours on that. But I mentioned in a previous video, probably 7 or 8 videos back now, something like that, how that there are 4 different types of equality that can occur when it comes to gender equality. Um, so women can try to get men to think like women, to be more sensitive and emotional, yada yada yada. So the men get pulled in the women's direction, and we all think in a sensitive, emotional way. Or we can go the other way, where men try to get women to think just like men do, and to be rational, to think conceptually, and we emphasize elements of the male mindset. Then there's trying to meet halfway, and then there's this idea of let a woman be a woman and a man be a man, just like the song says. Um, um, some guy from way back, Dyke into something, but yeah. So I can't think of the name. But anyway, so long story short, this 14th uh, level of thought has to do with men getting women to understand not just the man's rationale, which has gotten a lot of mention over the years, but this other more powerful sphere of thought in the man's mind, which is the conceptual thought, and very few men actually use that level of thought to any notable degree. And it is a hard part of the mind to get a man to use, and then getting him to think himself into godhood is even harder. But so now we're actually going backwards in a sense from trying to get men to think themselves into godhood and develop that 11th sphere of thought, down to just trying to get them to use that 10th sphere that they tend not to use enough. Uh, and then not just getting men to do that, but also raising the woman's consciousness as well, and getting her to think conceptually and to compartmentalize things. Women have complained about men compartmentalizing everything, and that's almost all of the mention that the man's conceptual thought even gets is women complaining that men compartmentalize everything. But now, this 14th sphere of thought is actually how should I put it? A specific type of authority, a specific type of power, where you just constantly are trying to get people on that level, compartmentalizing things, uh, generalizing the types of things that happen in society, thinking about what types of things should happen, what types of things shouldn't happen, coming up with a consistent set of concepts, principles, and it's not something completely new, but making it a society-wide thing, getting everybody on that level is completely new. That much is completely new, and there are other completely new things that can happen with respect to this issue. Um, so let me see. Um, it is what makes gender equality possible. Uh, Women have to be able to, and well, I should say, ready, willing, and able to think conceptually and to have deep, often uncomfortable conversation about uh, the types of things that should and shouldn't happen in society, about the types of things that do and don't constitute true peace, about the general ways in which government should function, and so forth. But this 14th level of thought, the 14th sphere, it actually has other manifestations because, like I said, I believe that God has used the U.S. government as a conduit for his necessary evils for the past few decades, anyway. And if God were to stop doing that, the U.S. government wouldn't necessarily go away. I mean, they would see their geopolitical influence greatly decreased, and it could amount to Afghanistan only being the first of many nations that say, U.S., get the fuck out, get your military out of our country, uh, and just everything just getting pulled back into the U.S., or at the very least, us just becoming dormant as a worldwide influence. And, and, uh, and so I've said that well, I probably said it earlier in this video actually, that the UN corresponds with that 12th sphere, that rider whose name is death. The U.S. corresponds with what, the 11th and the 13th. The state level government corresponds with the 10th and the 14th. But that also means that the governments of other nations, namely the ones that the U.S. government has dealt with for the most part, they also qualify as the 10th and the 14th, uh, because even though the U.S. government doesn't have official authority over them, because God has used the U.S. government as his conduit for necessary evils, any government that is directly under the U.S. government, uh, whether it's a state government in this country or God has, in his mind's eye, said that the other governments of the world are somehow under the U.S. government, and he has not used them as his conduit for necessary evils, then they too are on the same level as the 50 state governments of the U.S. as far as this spiritual structure is concerned. And so now, as the as God withdraws his, shall we say, spirit of necessary evils from the U.S. government, from the great Satan, as one of the Ayatollahs called us, or at least one of the Ayatollahs called us, might have been more than one. But as God withdraws his spirit of necessary evils and the power that accompanies it from the U.S. government, then and that corresponds with this God element of the mind, then we go down to where no one is being required to develop this God element, and God actually stops trying to get anyone to develop this higher level of thought, this God element, and he just kind of lets us function at that 10th level and lower. But because it follows his God's necessary evils, it's not the 10th but the 14th. Okay, so because and you might say, well, how does that happen? Well, because you're going first, you're going up the scale to the from the rationale to the conceptual thought to the God element to this final 12th element, and so initially, when you use that rationale, that conceptual thought, it doesn't factor in that 12th level, that death spear, that eye of the storm, and then once you become conscious of the widespread destruction that is possible, then it basically upgrades these two parts of the mind. It upgrades your God element, if you have one, to the 13th level. It upgrades your conceptual thought to the 14th level. And so I know it's kind of hard to explain, and it'll be easier to explain once enough destruction occurs in society. So I'm not trying to make this a video that makes me popular immediately or recognized immediately. But and my explanation may be a little bit sloppy, but I think that probably by, like I say, my next birthday, February 15th, 2022, when I turn 53, by that time, what I'm saying in these videos will become relevant, and I won't need to try to explain things in less than 10 hours of video. Um, and who knows, I may be given a bully mic to fully explain everything, no matter how long it takes. I may have to actually begin some kind of class. I don't know. But I'm just doing my best to get the ball rolling. So yeah, let me see what else I haven't mentioned. So this 14th level, because it follows that 12th element, Um, it's pushing out against destruction. It's an extension of necessary evils, and even though um, you'd no longer be pushed by God through His various efforts to develop that 11th spear to become a demigod, um, by you only using what you were born with, um, you're actually trying to satisfy a higher level of thought with a less powerful part of the mind, that 10th spear as opposed to that 11th spear, and thinking about the concepts at work in the world around you and trying to figure out how to re-engineer society, if you will. um, and that re-engineering doesn't just include the things that we generally think about in terms of government initiatives. It also goes so far as to affect uh, how we deal with women. And when that 14th spear of thought becomes widespread across society, then men are not going to be condescending toward women, and they're not going to allow women to play the victim. They're going to uh, treat women as though they can and will think on the same level as a man. The gentler treatment of women, and I don't mean that people are going to become violent, but just in terms of how they think about your mind, and actually, women are themselves going to, on a very large scale, move up to a higher level of thought. I mentioned uh, that I mentioned a couple of pre-rational levels of thought. I didn't address the first 6 zones of thought in the mind, but I started with the 7th, and then I mentioned that the 9th is rationale, and that also is the first, corresponds with the first apocalyptic course. But the 7th and 8th spheres of thought, let me say a little more about them. So I believe that girls are actually born with 7 spheres of thought in their mind, not the 10 that boys are born with. They can develop in 8th, and then there are other things that can happen to move them up to a higher level of thought. But um, I believe that as this 14th sphere or level of thought spreads through society, that women in general, even those who haven't already developed this 8th sphere of thought in the mind, they're going to do so. And if you go back in the videos, then you'll see where I said that a common insult hurled at women who only have the 7 spirits of thought they were born with is that they're sometimes referred to as a cunt, thought of as being stupid, whereas women who develop this 8th sphere of thought, they're sometimes insulted by being called a bitch. They're a little more assertive. They do think in terms of immediate solutions, if not long-term ones. That rationale, that 9th sphere of thought, actually is what causes you to think in long, long plans, long trains of thought. So let me see. Well, there's going to be a point at which I just have to say, okay, I've done what I can to explain this matter, and it's going to have to sit back and let things fall apart in society, and hopefully things fall apart enough by Christmas of 2021 to where people want answers, and maybe I'll be able to offer them some answers. But I'll also say before I reach 26 minutes and 51 seconds that I can also see where as this 14th level or sphere of thought unfolds in society. Well, first of all, I think that some of the ingredients are already in society, but I can also see where it might manifest through a female mayor, more specifically Mayor Muriel Bowser here in Washington, D.C. And so let me see how right I am. And so I think I'm going to end there. And when things fall apart enough in society, hopefully, by Christmas, then as we begin to go into 2022, then the things that I had some difficulty explaining in this series of videos, in this playlist, will become more relevant, and then I'll come up with additional ways of explaining these matters. But it is late. I do need to go to work tomorrow, so I'm signing off, and I've got about 5 seconds left before it cuts over to a new video. Good night.